James Rolfe is one of the longest-standing online content creators around. He was making videos before YouTube even existed, starting his now famous series, The Angry Video Game Nerd, in 2004. The nerd character has been around for almost 2 decades at this point, with all the episodes still pulling in 1 million views a pop, even to this day. Back when the nerd was even more popular, it wasn't too uncommon for episodes to receive upwards of 10 million views. Throughout the life of the series, it would receive multiple video game adaptations, a feature-length movie starring the character, and celebrity guest appearances on the show. When you're this popular and at the forefront of a brand new evergreen genre of content, you're definitely going to have those inspired by you and imitators. Today, we're going to discuss one of the most influential online content creators ever in the birth of a genre, to see the history of the series, and to look how much its influence has spread. Growing up as a kid, James Rolfe had a love for making home movies. You can find a lot of these movies online, as he's not ashamed of his old work. While most of these movies did, or at least tried, to tell a narrative, some of these were rather videos where he's just pointing a camera at a TV in the late 80s and early 90s discussing and playing video games. The first 3 episodes of the AVGN were uploaded to YouTube on April 8th, 2006. One day before my 3rd birthday. That's how long he's been making these videos. But like I previously said, he started in 2004. Originally, these episodes were home movies titled Bad NES Games. They were just made as jokes, never meant to be publicly available. The joke being you're watching a grown man get unrealistically upset at video games that, at the time, were already 20 years old. There was no point in caring, and especially getting this upset. In these videos, the nerd uses foul and crude language, and viciously picks the games apart. All of what I just said would become staples of the character and show. The first games discussed were Castlevania and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. These would remain the only episodes for 2 years, and the only way to view them was apparently on the Cinemassacre Gold Collection VHS tape. Cinemassacre is the name of James's media company. James's friends really liked these videos and encouraged him to make more. When YouTube came out in the mid-2000s, longtime friend Mike Matei would get James to upload the original 2 and seemingly then a brand new episode about the Karate Kid. This was still before the brand of the show was fully established. Now the series was called The Angry Nintendo Nerd instead of the bland Bad NES Games. The name of the series was changed one last time to The Angry Video Game Nerd later down the line. This was done to avoid legal issues with Nintendo and to not limit James to only discussing Nintendo video games. Mike would now assist James out in productions for the episodes, assisting James by writing, creating art, getting gameplay, and playing certain characters. Also helping out with the production was Kyle Justin, who created the iconic theme song and did many variations of it. Not only that, he made other songs for the series, like Nintendo Power. The videos would quickly receive attention, the first viral nerd video being the 5th episode about the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles NES game. It got so popular it ended up being featured by MTV. And it makes sense why James garnered traction so fast. This was when YouTube first came out and there wasn't a lot of content on it. Not only that, a lot of the content was just bad. James wasn't just some clueless kid dicking around with his mom's $200 digital camera in Windows Movie Maker. He graduated with a bachelor's in fine arts. He knew what he was doing with the equipment to do it in a time where no one else did. The series would have to stop premiering new episodes on YouTube in 2007, however. At this time, making money directly off the YouTube website and making a living was not something that could be easily done. While the YouTube Partner Program, which is the program you need to be in to monetize your content with ads, opened in 2007, it was elusive to most people until 2012. And I would imagine the YouTube 2007 ad rate was pretty bad even if you were in it. So starting in 2007, the episodes would be uploaded onto Screw Attack, in-game trailers first, and then later posted to YouTube after a certain amount of time had passed. That's why, unlike every YouTube upload of the AVGN between the years 2007 and 2011, it opens with a logo and the original release date, while the YouTube upload date is completely different. This is something a lot of content creators did back in the day, since they had issues getting ads on their videos and issues with YouTube in general, like channels getting unfairly deleted due to the new copyright bots. They would make money off of ads on their website and use YouTube as a way to drive traffic to their website. Back then, video creators weren't just bound to being on YouTube. You could host content on your own website and get viewers and make money. This stopped being a common thing in like the 2010s. I don't know really anybody who does this nowadays. The Nerd could be, as far as I know, the first review series ever with a character being the focus of it, especially an angry one. As you watch these videos, there's a lore that's there. This is its own universe, there's other characters that inhabit it, and the audience gets rewarded for noticing these things. Not every nerd video would include other characters, but you know, some of them did. One of my favorite episodes of the AVGN would be an early episode. It's one that deviates from the normal formula. In fact, in this episode, he's not even that angry. It's the Nintendo Power episode. It kind of feels like instead of raging at old video games, James just wanted to discuss something from his childhood that he enjoyed and that doesn't exist anymore. Video game magazines. But since this was a nerd episode, he of course doesn't shy away from cursing and making the occasional crude remark and visual gag, but it's much toned down in this episode. As the years went on though, the series did stir up some controversy. One being the fans were not happy with the crowd-funded AVGN movie released in 2014. The movie was panned both by critics and even fans, although some still defend it. And as of 2015, a company called Screenwave Media has been involved with all of James's productions. A lot of fans do not like this company, feeling they have made the content less enjoyable and not as quality as it used to be. Not to mention, there's been some scandal since their involvement. One scandal involving plagiarism for James's annual Monster Madness series. It seems James had someone write a script about an old monster movie, and the guy who wrote the script just plagiarized someone's article about it. So since Screenwave has had involvement, James's respectability has shrunk in the eyes of some die-hard fans, who discuss their thoughts on a subreddit called Cinemassacre Truth. If you want to know more, you can find many video essays discussing this topic in great detail. Despite this, it doesn't change the fact James is one of the most influential online creators out there. The influence of the nerd would be immediate. People quickly popped up being inspired or straight up ripping him off. The most early inspired and prominent creator I can think of would be Doug Walker, who played the Nostalgia Critic. Doug, like James, is still around making this type of content all this time later, and still has a rather large audience. There's similarities between the two. Both review series center around an angry character who reviews old media that's mostly bad. But the critic reviewed movies while the nerd reviewed games. James and Doug would engage in a satirical feud. It started with Doug making a video declaring himself the nerd's mortal enemy, and then the two would respond back and forth through videos. Now, the Nostalgia Critic did get some hate from nerd fans at first, but James made it clear that their beef was just a bit. James would shout out the critic's website at the time, thatguywiththeglasses.com, driving a lot of new traffic towards it. The two would then start collaborating in real life and making content together. This was a big deal at the time. Nowadays, in real life collaborations between two popular content creators are a dime a dozen, but this was when online content was brand new. So for two very popular people to do stuff like this was insane, and still kinda is insane this happened in hindsight. I think the reason the critic is not commonly considered a copycat is, for one, his content focus was different. James was doing this with games, and Doug was doing this with movies. And I think Doug definitely had his own comedic spin and style. Definitely inspired, but original and different enough. and also because James willingly collaborated with him over the years, going as far to include him in a lot of big projects he was involved in, like an Easter egg in the video games starring his character, and a cameo in the AVGN movie. Throughout the years, the two characters and creators have been pretty closely associated. So much so, they were both given an Easter egg in an anime no one remembers. Outside of the fact, the AVGN and Critic were in it briefly. The two would even recreate their iconic portrayal in the anime in real life. However, James would seemingly not like other creators who were quote-unquote inspired, as these creators were different from Doug. They simply weren't just inspired and then did their own thing. Rather, they were just ripping him off and arguably plagiarizing his work. In a video by Quentin Reviews about this topic, he makes the point where it's kind of hard to draw the line between homage and straight up ripoff when it comes to creators that came after the nerd. The nerd created the concept of the angry online reviewer persona or character, and obviously not everyone who makes an angry online review, with or without a persona, is a copycat or a plagiarist. But when you look at a creator like the Irate Gamer or the Game Dude, it's easy to see why these guys weren't well liked by the audience who consumed this type of content. The Irate Gamer, for example, is a very similar name to the angry video game nerd. The Irate Gamer was also an angry, foul-mouthed reviewer of old games. The type of games he reviewed were NES, which is what James focused a lot on, sometimes even covering the same games as James with apparently very similar criticisms. And also, the videos weren't just as good as the AVGN episodes were, and they don't hold up that well in the eyes of a lot of people in retrospect. He was definitely talented in some regards, in terms of things like video editing, but that obviously wasn't enough for his critics. Not only was his content so similar, to the point where many called it plagiarism, he seemed to act like James didn't even exist. People like the Game Dude, who is a story for another day. People like the Game Dude who did videos very similar to the AVGN, at least would pretty openly state, yeah, I'm a fan of James. But the Irate Gamer didn't. When the Irate Gamer first started making videos, he, like James, only did it for fun, not expecting anything to come from it, just something to show his friends, and felt it was okay to borrow from other creators as these were his first videos. And he cited an email from James, a fan published, where he said he was flattered by people doing content just like his, as a justification for this. At one point before the series, Irate Gamer and its creator, Chris Bors, blew up, he was reached out to by members from his small audience and even people at game trailers, letting him know about a contest called Outnerd the Nerd. Irate Gamer entered as the person from game trailers told him he would probably win. He didn't, and claimed the contest was rigged and said James likely snuffed him. Chris would finally have his big break, however, when YouTube featured his content. Nowadays, being featured by YouTube is kinda a joke. If you go to the featured section, nowadays called trending, it's mostly corporate content. Nothing from small creators, and I don't know many people who even go to this page often anymore. But back then, being featured was a huge deal, and you were plastered all over the website. In a video by Chris in 2014 discussing the drama in retrospect, he claims overnight he became YouTube famous, gaining 11,000 subscribers. At the time, Chris claimed James only had 25,000, although I wasn't able to verify the numbers. So James might have been a little peeved about the fact a fan copying him just amassed like half of his subscribers in a single night. Not only that, AVGN had not been featured by YouTube at that point. Apparently, the Irate Gamer was the first ever online reviewer that YouTube featured. Not only that, he was featured again weeks later, gaining even more popularity and hate from people who watched and made this type of content. Chris would send James an email, trying to make everything clear and, in his words, extend an olive branch. James replied saying he was fine with it, but wanted the Irate Gamer to make it crystal clear to everyone he was inspired by James. Since the Irate Gamer didn't respond and do what he asked, James would allegedly post the email that Chris sent him without his permission. Later on, James would refer back to being ghosted by Chris.
What do you think of the Irate Gamer?
Well, answer that as quickly as I can. I have no reason to answer it. I mean, he pretty much pretends that I don't exist, so why would I even need to say anything about it? I don't realize what that does.
Although, at some point, Mike Matei would say he posted the email, not James. And the reason he leaked it was due to the fact the Irate Gamer apologized for stealing jokes in the email, but then a week later did a video on the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game, which Mike said was the biggest incident of plagiarism by him yet. So Mike leaked it to show Chris doesn't stand by his words. Chris claimed he was going to stop, but then did the same thing afterwards. Another thing regarding the beef I find interesting is the fact Chris accused James of copying him at some points.
During this time as well, James was kind of doing things to me as well that I'm sure, just the regular people wouldn't pick up on. As you know, the Mario Bros. 2 review, he watched it. He told me he watched it. Shortly after that, he ended up making his Mario 3 review. And there's a lot of similarities in that review if you watch it. Both are set up like half documentary, half review. Both have like a satanic type theme to it, which I thought was interesting. There's just a lot of other similarities where if the tables were reversed, if I had done my Mario review after his Mario 3 review, I would have been dragged through the mud and for doing something like that. But yeah, it was just things like that. I would announce things that I wanted to review. I announced, I'm going to review Silver Surfer. He did it a month later. And then I announced, I'm going to do Superman. Superman 64. He did that a month later. So there came a point where I had to stop posting on my website the reviews that I wanted to do because James would always beat me to the punch. I did not have a lot of free time to work on this stuff like he did.
The hate against Chris would last for years. The hate he got is actually on another level for what he was doing, in my opinion. The Irate Gamer was just making angry game reviews that were a little too similar to James and weren't as good. But some people really hated him for this. Someone ran a blog spot called Irate Gamer Sucks, discussing in detail why he sucks. Now, this blog spot is inactive. As of 2022, some guy ran a blog spot for 13 years with nearly 500 entries just to shit on Chris. This is another level of A-logging. Although this beef is in the past, James and Chris have recently made a collaboration video on Chris's channel, and James seems happy about it. It's nice to see an old beef get resolved in a wholesome way. Chris's online YouTube venture on this channel has been pretty dead for years, so it was kind of James to drive some attention to the channel. Although apparently the Irate Gamer has like another channel for kids that has like 1 million subs, so I guess he's doing alright for himself. JonTron is one of the few AVGN-inspired creators who would surpass James in popularity. John started creating videos all the way back in the 2000s, but didn't start the JonTron channel doing retro game reviews until summer 2010. JonTron, like pretty much everyone in the genre of comedic media reviews, is in some way influenced by the AVGN, whether they know it or not. John would start off his own channel, not counting when he worked for, I think it was Screw Attack, reviewing Nintendo 64 games, as John was younger than James, so obviously he grew up in a different era of video games and, talked about them more. He still did talk about, like, the NES, but you get what I'm trying to say. While there are similarities between the two, John definitely had his own style to it all. He would still get angry and loud, but it was different from James. I would say a big difference is John wasn't playing a character like James, more so a persona, a version of himself, but different to be entertaining for a YouTube audience. And as John got bigger, his focus for content would get away from video games. For the most part, JonTron would go on to discuss different things, like movies, weird products, and more, while James definitely does also talk about things like movies and even board games. When you bring up James Rolfe, almost everyone instantly just knows him for the AVGN and not much else. But with John, a lot of people do know him for gaming, but also for other things, as he became an even more mainstream figure branching out, which was something James was never able to obtain by doing other series, with the biggest of his career being about Flex Tape that has 70 million views. I'm sure a lot of people don't even know JonTron for retro game reviews. They know him for this or something else, like the fireworks cover. Let's move on from John to talk about other creators at Normal Boots, which was a network of creators John was a part of. I feel like a lot of the Normal Boots people back then had their own style and content. There was no Irate Gamer-like person among their ranks as far as I know, who was just a ripoff of the nerd. Like, yeah, they all reviewed games and sometimes got fake angry at them to be funny, but the ways the videos were made, the types of games discussed, opinions shared, and personality all feel distinct enough from each other. Like, for example, Peanut Butter Gamer's most popular videos were about hacking old video games and doing wacky and comedic things in them. That's not something AVGN or JonTron were doing often in their videos, if at all. Pro Jared wasn't a creator I really followed. To be honest, all I really know about him is he did a satirical review of Madden 17, guest starred on Nickelodeon, and had some fiasco with his ex-wife. But watching a bit of his content and researching him for this video, he seems to make good videos. What separates him from the rest of the Normal Boots crew and a lot of other people in this genre of content is apparently none of the other guys like to talk about RPG games, and that's Pro Jared's specialty apparently. Now, not all the people who get popular doing this type of content get to collaborate with James. There are dozens of people popular for doing media reviews where they sometimes get fake angry or are angry constantly, and are playing a character or persona. But JonTron did get to do collaborations, and it's nice seeing someone getting to hang out in the studio, aka James's basement, of someone whose content they looked up to. There's an endless amount of figures who are directly or somehow inspired by the nerd, but I figured the last guy we should discuss in this video is Scott the Woz. If you watch my content, you'd know I'm a huge fan. I have multiple videos about him. He's one of my favorite content creators ever. Anyway, Scott is very important in this genre of content. Not only does he have the most consistent output of quality content than like anyone ever has in this genre of content. Well, I mean, he's kind of slowed down in recent years, but you know what I'm saying. With him putting out a new video basically every Sunday night, I also feel like he's also the most distinct out of anyone I can think of who does this. While Scott does sometimes get fake or real angry in his videos, Scott in his main channel videos feels more like an exaggerated version of himself, a persona. He's not playing a character for the most part. While on Scott's second channel or a podcast appearance, he is definitely much more calm and quiet than in his main videos. I still feel like the opinions he shares in his main channel videos are genuine, and not someone writing the opinions of a character like James. In my opinion, Scott's in a more similar boat to JonTron than AVGN. However, he is still definitely inspired by the AVGN, as, you know, that's what this whole video is about. The reason the nerd is funny is because he's harshly and crudely picking apart old video games from mostly the 80s and 90s angrily. While James probably doesn't like these games, the way he talks about them is over the top, and when he's making these videos, he's obviously looking for anything to complain about. And because of that, it's not always the most genuine review in my opinion. Plus, in more recent years, a company called Screenwave Media has stepped in to assist James in content production. I don't even know how much of these videos he's writing himself anymore, which, I think it's fine, because these are made to be more entertaining, rather than giving insight into whether you should buy the game or not. To contrast that, the reason Scott is funny is because he's energetic and quirky, not to mention how fast-paced the comedy in his skits are. I don't know how to describe Scott's style of humor other than saying what I just said. His style of comedy is completely different from James. While James swears non-stop in his videos, Scott censors the swears. And because of the fact Scott isn't playing an angry character screaming and fake shitting on games, I feel like his takes on games are more genuine and in good faith for the most part. Despite the differences between the Woz and the nerd, there are still similarities. Scott's videos, like James, have an ongoing lore, and the audience is rewarded greatly for paying attention basically every year with what you could more so call short movies, or sometimes actual feature-length movies. While Scott has yet to pass James in subs, like JonTron, his weekly videos always get more than 1 million views at the minimum. I feel like someday he will pass James, although I don't know if he cares enough to do that, as Scott is a big fan of James and I think he actually enjoys making the videos, rather than just enjoying making fat stacks and getting fame from them. I've seen people call Scott the next evolution of the AVGN style. While I kinda see where they're coming from with this line of thinking, I rather see these types of creators as generations. AVGN and others like the Nostalgia Critic being the first, JonTron and Normal Boots being the second, and Scott the Woz being the third. Now that's likely not an entirely perfect statement to make. You could totally divide the generations by which creators started creating in what year and have like 16 generations. But an issue doing it this way is where would you place someone like the Urinating Tree? UT started off and gained some success doing angry video game reviews back years ago, but his channel wouldn't go anywhere for years until he popped off around 2016 doing sport videos. Point is, you can look at a bunch of different creators and say or argue that they felt the AVGN's influence. I mean, you could say he's even inspired me. I don't think it matters to have these arguments though. I think the fact that you can even, hypothetically debate these things with so many different creators just shows how much influence James's work has. Whether James likes it or not, he's a pioneer. And the angry video game nerd was the birth of a genre and an influence for many creators.